Okay. All right. You could sit. You could sit here in the middle. Okay. We good, Mark? All right. So first of all, welcome everyone. Welcome to Chabad of Toluca Lake. Those joining us online and those that are joining us here in person. For those that are joining us online, you don't know what refreshments you're missing out on. But l'chaim. So once again, it's a big privilege to have my father with us in town. And the Mirza Hashem, he should always travel here for simchas, and only simchas. And being that when he's here, we always enjoy his teachings and shiurim. And this time, we were lucky enough that he wasn't as busy as he usually is, and we were able to have a lecture with him as well. Tonight's topic I chose because I believe it's a topic that interests many. And as much as it interests many, there's so much ignorance and unknown about this topic. And unfortunately, you see it a lot, both at Shiva houses when you come for it in the morning, and the confusion that people have, especially with what Judaism believes versus what other religions believe. And unfortunately, a lot of beliefs that from other religions have become confused with what Jews believe with regards to the soul and where a person goes and what our definition of heaven and hell is, etc. And unfortunately, I think many utilize that as a scare tactic for some, because it's such an easy way to get people to do things when you telling them, well, if you be a good boy, you get 70 pizzas. And if you be a bad boy, you get brimstones and things like that. Whereas even that simplistic idea of heaven and hell is not necessarily what Jews believe. So my father, Baruch Hashem, throughout the years of him being a rabbi of a large community in South Africa, is very well known in South Africa, especially to be able to comfort people amongst at a time that they needed most, when a loved one has passed on. And he's very well knowledgeable in this topic. And not only knowledgeable, but his words are words that many find comfort in. So we're very happy to have him. So the way, if it will be good with you, I think let's talk for say about 40 minutes or so. And then you're welcome to ask questions. Those that want to ask questions online, you can either raise your hand and we'll put you on, or you can do it through the chat box or on Facebook. And then especially over here in person, you don't want to say it in person, you can also write it. But we'll do first a 40-minute presentation, and then we'll go to questions. Good? All right, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Margie, for this warm and beautiful
introduction. Can everyone hear?
It's a little deaf and not as loud as normal.
How are you?
Very close.
How are you, Moshe? How are you, Alex?
Nice to see you. Is that better?
That's better, yes.
Now we can see.
You're right. You're right. I also felt that way.
I didn't just say so.
I don't know. But, I mean, you're a guest here. Okay. As your rabbi, my son mentioned, I came for a simcha. Baruch Hashem, I have a son and daughter-in-law in San Diego, who adopted 2 children about 10 years ago. And for the first time in 18 years, they had a son, Avram David, and we say Zeh HaKaton Gadol Yeh, as we spoke about, that he should become great. But that leads me to our topic. The subject is called the afterlife. And you will hear many different discussions from many different viewpoints on life after death. Excuse me. But the truth is that there is another side to the coin, which not as many people discuss. What is the other side to the coin of life after death? It is life before birth. What do you think you were before you were born? Is there anybody who has observed a baby with all their personality and characteristics and individuality? Is there anyone in his right mind who can honestly say that all a human being is, if you take a drop from a guy, an egg from a woman, melek this zusammen, you put it together in das bist du. And that's a whole human being with all his personality. And if you think that's all we are, have you ever seen identical twins? Children that even the parents have problems telling them apart. Why? Because they come from the same egg and the same sperm. So everything is exactly the same, and yet their personalities are totally different. I put it to you that even if one day they'll succeed in cloning people to the extent that the iris of one guy's eye will open up the ATM machine of the other, or even the iPhone with the mask or without the mask, it'll open that up, they'll still be individuals. Because we didn't start as a fetus. That in itself is a whole discussion, which seems to have political bearing in America about when does a human being begin, and with abortion, etc. I don't want to go into any politics, chas v'sholom, but I just, someone sent me a little clip of this Congresswoman AOC who said Jews accept abortion, which is a total baba maisa. We certainly don't. But even without going into that, we do not start at conception or birth. In fact, the way the Rebbe puts it is that the connection between parents and children, the connection of families is an eternal one. It is not limited by time, space, or death. And know that you cannot see them, but they can see you, which is in itself we could discuss. And know too that it's not just the soul continues to exist, the relationship it began continues as well. And if you ever encounter challenges in your life, your loved one in heaven is praying on your behalf. So the first thing we should establish is that the way the Talmud puts it is that a human being is much more than we see with our physical eyes. What we see is the body. What we're seeing there is the parents' contribution. But there's 3 partners in every human being. Hashem contributes our neshama, our soul. That soul had an existence before we were born. That soul, we believe, has been since the creation of the world. And at a certain time in life, Hashem takes that soul and says, I am going to put you into a body for a limited amount of time. And I'm giving you time in order to fulfill certain missions. And he partners with those parents. And until the person, as long as the person is on this earth, when the person leaves this earth, Hashem says, my portion, my neshama is returning to me. It is the parents' contribution that is laid to rest. There's a very interesting Talmudic teaching in Kedushin, Daf Mem Aleph, in the tractate of Kedushin, page 40, folio 41, where the Talmud discusses the obligation of kabed esovicha vesimecha, honoring your parents, revering, fearing your parents, ish imay v'aviv tiro, and lois sekala, the fact that you're not allowed to curse your parents, that carries so many different sentences. And what is the reason for it, says the Talmud? Why do we owe our parents all those obligations? Because they're partners with God in giving us life here on earth. And whatever you owe one partner, you owe the other partners. So the Talmud actually equates our obligation to our parents as our obligation to the Almighty, and to show them the same gratitude. And we are here, sent here for certain purposes and missions. And as a result, we are placed in the exact time we have to be in history. We are given the different potentials and challenges. We are given a certain, whatever it is that we have to accomplish, that is what Hashem gave us in order to do it. And that is leading up, so to say, to the afterlife. Now, we discussed in the Mishnah that this world is called Olam HaMa'aseh. The other world is called Olam HaSchar. This world is the world in which you have to do the action. The next world is the world in which you get the real rewards for everything that you have done. You know, speaking about the rewards, what does the Talmud tell us? That when you do a mitzvah, the reward, schai mitzvah bahai al meleke, there's no reward for mitzvahs in this world, it's in the next one. Tell me, how can you be sure? How many people have you met lately who have come back to you from the next world and said, the rewards we're receiving here made all the sacrifices worth it? It's unbelievable. How do you know? For that matter, how do we know anything about the spiritual world? But that's a different discussion, which I hope we'll still touch on. But just this question, think about it. You know, as we believe in the eternity of the soul, as we believe in God and that He made us, where does it make sense for God to give us the reward? Let me give you, for instance, tomorrow is the 24th of May. Imagine if you decide to put on tefillin. And if anybody here hasn't yet thought about it, I'd urge you to put on tefillin. Okay? So you do the mitzvah. Now imagine if you'd say to God, you promised me a reward for the mitzvah. What reward can I ask for? Inflation is going haywire. You know how much it costs to fill up your car today in comparison to what it was? And have you seen my bank account balance lately? So God, you know, as a good reward for putting on tefillin, here's my bank account number. It would be nice if you would make a deposit in this account. Okay, mazel tov. After your life on earth, you come upstairs. And you know what happens? When you get there, it's like a video of every thought, speech, and action has been played. And it's all played back to you. Teshuvah can delete it, certain things, but it's all played back to you. Hey, 1 minute. I seem to recall that on May 24th, 2022, I put on tefillin, but I see that it doesn't feature here. What happened to that mitzvah? So they take out a spiritual copy of your bank account and they say, don't you remember your prayer? And that is that as a reward for the mitzvah, we should put a deposit into this account. Yeah, you see that deposit? That's from us. That's for your mitzvah. What would your soul say? Thank you so much. I could really do a lot with that paper up here. Would your neshama say, 1 minute, I did a spiritual deed. I expect a spiritual reward. One kid that my soul could enjoy for all eternity. So the mission, we are being taught, remember what it's all about. In this world, you're coming to do mitzvot. And we learned it actually in the Mishnah. In which parak was it? Parak Dalet, where the Mishnah says that 1 hour spent in this world doing mitzvot is greater than the whole next world. And the bliss of the next world, 1 hour of bliss in the next world is greater than the whole world. Because here, when we do a mitzvah, we're taking the whole of godliness. A mitzvah is God's wisdom. So when we're doing a mitzvah, we're taking God. And the reward, however, is in the next world. Can I tell you a story rather than just carry on like this? Does everybody know the story of Yosela of Krakow? You know that story? Tzach, you know the story?
Krakow?
Tell it again.
Okay. A story some people don't mind hearing more than once. It's like a song. So here's a story that is often told by my late cousin, Shlomo Carlebach. You know, in the Middle Ages, most of our ancestors who lived in Eastern Europe were very poor. And there were many reasons for it. Amongst them is that they were not allowed to own land. They were not allowed to go into the universities. They couldn't enter the professions. They couldn't open a business that was in competition with the goyim. And they were stuffed into ghettos. So what opportunity was there? If disease broke out, it spread like wildfire. Maybe that is why people got married so young, because life expectancy was so short that if you didn't get the next generation early, who knows, you know? So the position of the Jews then was very dire. And yet, in many of the ghettos, there was a few entrepreneurs who made it big, and they would share what they had. So this story takes place in Krakow in the Middle Ages. There was a Yid there by the name of Yosel. He was known to be a very wealthy man, but he was a miser. He was never seen giving 1 cent to the poor. And no one likes a miser. Do you know why? So my cousin says, on Rosh Hashanah, we wish one another, Lishana Tova Umetuka. Have a good year and a sweet year. Why do we use 2 expressions? So his answer is he travels the world. And sometimes he meets people who are very tov. They're very good, but they're not matuk. They're not sweet. Sometimes you find people who are very sweet, but not good. So Rosh Hashanah, we wish the sweet people become good, and the good people will become sweet, you see. So most people have at least one quality, either goodness or sweetness. A miser is neither. He's not good, he's not sweet, he's just anti-God. Nobody liked him. When he walked down the street, everyone would whisper behind his back, there's the miser. You know, in those days, everybody went to shul. There wasn't an option. The whole ghetto was in shul. But when Yosela came to shul, he was never greeted. They never offered him an aliyah. Nobody said good Shabbos to him. He had the far corner. He went and he sat there, but he had a thick skin, never seemed to bother. Vayihi Hayom, the day came, even misers have to leave the world. And the Chav Kaddish in those days used to come around your bed, prepare you for the final journey, as they call it. They would take your vidui, they would do the Jewish confession with you, and they turn to Yosel and say, look, you're such a wealthy man. You can't take your money with you anyway. So what are you going to do with it? You know what? You were going to charge 5,000. Normally we charge 5,000 rubles for a funeral. You were going to charge 50,000. And the extra money we'll give to the poor. Do something good with it, at least now. Yosel is dying, but he's not senile. He knows a bad offer when he hears it. He says, so much money for a funeral, bist du Ropfen Zinnen? Are you off your rocker? You'll get the customary 5. I can't give you more. What do you mean you can't give us more? But what could they do to him? He's dying. So they said, listen, Yosel, we're going to take a vow. If you don't give us the money, we promise we're not going to pay it. That's wrong, really, by halacha. But they were so upset with him, they didn't ask the rabbis, they just made that threat. Yosel didn't get to his station in life by giving in to threats. He was stronger than that. So he says, okay, so you won't. But the money canst du vergessen. You can forget about it. And suddenly gets pain, he yells, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, and with his words, Hashem Echad, he leaves the world. The people were so upset. They were disgusted. And they decided, as they say, they didn't consult the rabbis or anyone. They decided they're going to make an example of him, that that's not the way you behave. It was Sunday afternoon. They left the house. That's it. Wednesday, a neighbor had pity on his wife and children. Yosel is still lying in his bed, no refrigeration, nothing. So he picked up Yosel, he took him to the cemetery. He did the whole tahara that you're supposed to. He dug a lonely grave and laid him to rest. Thursday night, the rabbi of that city, his name is Rabbi Kalman. He's a very great Kabbalist. We still have his Svarim, his books today. And this Rabbi Kalman is sitting and learning. You know, in Krakow, as in many other communities, if a family is destitute, very poor, the community raises money, and the rabbi was the trustee to give it out. So he's sitting and learning, and Bell the baker walks in. And he says, Rebbe, I have no money for Shabbos. I don't know how I'm going to make it. He says, okay, how much do you need? 5 rubles. I'll put you down on the list. Come tomorrow, I'll have the money for you. He says, but Bell, you've never been here before. How did you live till now? Have you just stopped working? He says, actually, I burnt my hands 3 years ago. I haven't worked for 3 years. He says, so how did you live the past 3 years? He says, I don't know. All I know is that every Thursday night, there's an envelope under my door with the 5 rubles I need. This is the first Thursday night. There's nothing. 10 minutes later, Shimon the shoemaker walks in. Rabbi needs 7 rubles to live. How did you live? Envelope under my door. Within hours. I think it's a bit chilly. Within hours. Hundreds. He wants to make sure nobody feels they're in hell. You see? Nobody feels they're in hell, so he's making it a bit tough. You see, so within hours, hundreds of people nobody knew were poor were coming with a similar story. This one needed 5 rubles, 7 rubles. It didn't take long for the rabbi to work out who was putting the envelopes under the door. This Yosel the miser, whom everybody had despised, everyone had made fun of, he was secretly supporting half the town. And not only didn't they give him a proper lifetime decent. They didn't even give him the basic human decency of a funeral. The next morning, he woke up, he called the whole town, and he said, Yidden, we have sinned. We had a hidden tzaddik in our midst. We treated him terribly. So I would like to request that Sunday, every man, woman, and child in Krakow come to the big shul. We're going to pray to Yossela's soul to forgive us. How do you know who you are? How did you know what each one needs? And it turns out that when they got destitute, they turned to their wife and say, Chanale, if we don't get help, we're not going to make it. Who can afford to help us? The only one we could think of is Yossela. They'd make their way to his house, he'd invite him in. What's your name? Bell the baker. How many kids you have? 14 canine order. Where do you live? To what do I owe this visit? And he'd say, if you could give me 5 rubles a week, I could make it. What? You're asking me for my hard-earned money? You think money grows on trees? You think it comes easily? Do you have any idea how many people come to my door asking me for my money? Do you know that if I were to give each and every one of them, you know where I'd be? In the same place you are. I work hard for my money. You want money, you will go and work hard yourself. He was a strong guy. Pick the guy up, throw him out. He said, never come here again. Within a few weeks, so it wasn't obvious, an envelope would start coming under the door. There's 2 things you do not do when you're getting such an envelope. One thing you don't do is run to the shul next day and say, hey, I'm getting an envelope. Are you, are you, are you? And the second thing you don't do is hire some PI, some private investigator to find out where it's coming from. You're just so thankful that it's there that you have one prayer on your lips, and that is it's going to be there again next week. Otherwise, machst das schweigen, you keep quiet. So I don't know how many people suspected, but no one talked about it. Can you imagine what it was like that Sunday in shul? The person who supported them, and they made fun of the prayers were to high heaven. Towards late afternoon, the rabbi did not feel he had gotten through. He had them open up the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark. And he prayed, and he said, Yossela, I'm begging you, in the name of the whole Krakow, give us a sign that you're not angry. Give us a sign that you're ready to forgive us. He suddenly felt very weak, and he fell asleep. He had a dream in which he saw Yossela, but shining like he's never seen before. And Yossela says, Rebbe, tell the townspeople I'm not angry with them. They have nothing to ask forgiveness for. This was my choice. I knew when I decided to help people, I could do it in one of 2 ways. Either everybody knows and they all doff their top hats and say, there's Yossela supporting the whole town. Or I do it in a way that only my creator and I know what I'm doing. And I want to tell you something. Do you know when you have disappointments in life? When you have expectations. If you don't have expectations, it's very difficult to be disappointed. So he said, I had no other expectations. How else would I expect people to behave if they think I have all this money and I'm just refusing to share it? So nobody behaved any different than expected. They have nothing to ask forgiveness for. So he says, but Yossela, weren't you lonely being buried all alone at night? He says, no. The souls of my parents, the shepherds of our people, came to greet my soul to its rightful place in heaven. So now comes one of the points of the story, which we also discussed on Shabbat. He says, Yossela, what's it like in heaven? What is heaven like? And as we discussed, if you look at any flower, any leaf. You know how many shades of green there are there? How would you describe those different shades of green of color to a person born blind who never saw color in his life? There's no way you could describe it. And not because he's stupid, he might be cleverer than you. He might deny such beauty exists, it would be his shortcut. But God created us with 5 senses for those who cope with the world. There are more senses that would exist. Had we the insight into this other senses, we'd see into the spiritual world. As we don't, we are like blind people trying to understand color. We could deny that color exists, but it would be our own shortcut. So Yosela says, Rebbe, I would love to explain to you what heaven is like. But even if I did, it would just be words. All I could tell you is that heaven exists, and it's more blissful than anything you can imagine, except for one thing. They don't have broken down doors in heaven. And what I miss more than anything else is my Thursday night walk from one door to the next. And when he awoke, the rabbi, he told him this story. And he asked him to put a tombstone for him. And Tzach, do you know what it says on the tombstone? Ponit ma Yosela hakamtsan hakadosh. Yosela, the holy miser. And if you want, you could look up on your Google for the tombstone of Yosela hakamtsan hakadosh, Yosela, the holy miser, and you'll find the stone. Yeah, or in other place, but the story carries very deep messages. There are many people who seem to deny that there's an afterlife. But you want to know something amazing? The most innocent and the most pure amongst human beings are children. And children naturally believe in these things. You know, Rabbi Manis Friedman tells that when you stand in, is a Trader Joe's or any of these places, when you're going shopping and you're waiting in a line. So you know what they do? They work out where the child's eyesight sitting in the cart is going to come to those sweets and things. And that's where they put the chocolates and everything. So the kid's standing in line with his mother. He says, Ma, I want that chocolate, that sweet or whatever. So the mother says, listen, Joe, I'm making your favorite supper. If you get this sweet now, you know, it's going to ruin your appetite. So it's not a good idea. He thinks to himself, the candies are now. Supper's in 6 hours. Hektar on shrine, he's fitching again. So the mother says, listen, you can't have it because when you go to the dentist, he's going to have all these fillings and holes in your teeth. It's not good. So he says, dentist, 6 months. Sweets are now. Right. Everyone's looking. The mother in frustration says, shut up, kid. Because if you don't, I promise you, I'm not taking you shopping again. Kid says, Mom's a liar. If she had who to leave me with, I wouldn't be here now. The only reason I'm here is because she has nothing else to do with it. So finally, the mother picks up the packet, looks at it, says, sorry, you cannot have it because it's not kosher. What does the kid do then, usually? He gives the mother a look as if to say, well, why didn't you say that in the beginning? And we could have saved this whole spiel. Doesn't question it. Now, if you'll say it's brainwashing, why the appetite, the sugar, the fillings, the yelling didn't, you know why? because a child, when you tell them it's God, when you tell them it's the neshama, when you tell them it's the spiritual things, they naturally believe. The basic concept of a human being from nature is to believe in a higher thing, is to believe in it. You know when they stop? When we teach them that it's all double verses. You know, there's a story of a little girl, Rachalea. She was 11 years old, and her father caught her telling a lie. And he said, Rachalea, I'm surprised at you. When I was your age, I never thought of telling a lie. She looks up inquiringly at him and says, well, Dad, at what age did you start? Because children are basically honest till we teach them that it's okay to lie. Children basically believe until we teach them, stop believing in that. It's stupidity. But we have to appreciate that the belief we have cannot translate into tangent like a physical thing, because we're not talking about a physical thing. As I mentioned, the Rebbe says, you can see them, but we can't see. They can see us, but we can't see them. Why not? One answer is, you know AM/FM radios? Can you pick up an AM station on an FM radio? They're both radios. They're both radio waves. But if you're transmitting on a different frequency, you can't pick it up. The spirit, this soul world is transmitting, but it's a different frequency. As Yossela told the rabbi, if you would pick up our frequency, this body wouldn't be able to contain the soul. It would just, the soul and body would separate. They can pick us up. We can't. And yet we can sense them. We certainly can sense that there is a spirit, that there is another world. Now, how much more time do we have?
Good, another 10 minutes.
Another 10 minutes. You know, just like there are stages in which the soul comes into the body. We talk about the mikveh before the conception, the birth, then the bris or the naming. Those are different stages. Does anybody know the final time that the neshama comes into the body? What is the final stage?
30 days.
Final stage is at bar and bat mitzvah. When the person is old enough to make choices, then his neshama elikut comes in, etc. Okay? There are 7 stages in leaving the world. The first is 30 days before the neshama leaves the world. There's something which we don't, it's a Kabbalistic term. In Hebrew, it's called tzel, which means shadow, but we don't know exactly what that is. But that subconsciously, the soul is aware that it's leaving the world. Nobody should think about it in foresight, but sometimes in hindsight, you can pick up clues that they were aware. You know, you've even heard about people in their 30s, their 40s. They come home and tell their family, I just want to tell you this, that, and the other. And then they're killed in a car accident. This wasn't something they were aware of consciously, but subconsciously, the soul is aware. So that's the first step. The second step is the moment of death, where the soul leaves the body. And that's a confusing time for the soul, because the soul sees the body, but it can't enter it. It hovers around it. And the soul doesn't leave the body until the funeral, which is one of the reasons we get the funeral done as quick as possible. It's very painful for the neshama. And it's one of the reasons we have to treat the body with utmost respect. And it's at the funeral. So the second stage is moment of death. Third stage that it's leaving the spiritual is the funeral. Okay? Then they have two other stages, which is from the moment of death, the relative, also the mourning has those stages. So he's called an onen. Onen means he's in shock, like the neshama is in shock. The funeral, and then you have the shiva, which is divided into two. The shlosha lebechi and arba lenichum avelim. The first three is for crying, just broken, and the second four is for consolation. So that's number 4 and 5. And then we say the neshama is in the home of the shiva. That's amongst the reasons why we cover the mirrors. They give 2 reasons for covering the mirrors. One is that it's not the time of vanity. You know, some people find it difficult to pass a mirror without smearing up there. You know what I mean? So it's not the time. Another reason they say is the neshama should not see, that it doesn't have a reflection anymore. By the way, I'd like to share with you a symbolic reason for covering the mirror. Simon just lost his mother. We want to wish him long life. But there's another reason. Simon was discussing his mother's flat. You know, when you go to your loved one's flat, you see their chair, you could still picture them sitting in the chair. There's so many things about their possessions that remind you of them. You know what a mirror is? A mirror shows your reflection when you're in front of it. You're there. When you're not in front of the mirror, it doesn't show you. A mirror doesn't tell you who was there. It only tells you who is there. A mirror is something that you could say out of sight, out of mind. You know, there's some people in life that make an impression. You meet them once or twice, you remember them. Then there's some people, Nebuch, who make no impression. You introduce to them 10 times, and on the 10th time you can't, oh yeah, we met, oh yeah, what's your name again? You know. So when you cover the mirror, you know what you're saying to your loved one? You might be out of sight, but you'll never be out of our mind. You're not going to be like a mirror. We're covering the mirror because the impact that you left on us is an indelible. You see, so the Shloshim is the 6th, and the 7th is Yud Bet Chodesh, 12 months. And it's not always the yard site. For example, in this year, the yard site would be in 13 months because of the leap year. But the mourning is only 12 months. Why do we say Kaddish for 11 months? Does anybody know? So let me ask you another question, and with this we'll have to finish, and then we'll open for questions. Do Jews believe in hell? Who said no? You said no. Any other?
Well, it is.
I think there is.
So it depends. The question is not what we believe, the word. The question is the definition of the word. As my son began saying, you have different religions, different definitions, etc. We know, most people know more about this stuff from the Christian religion than they do about them from the Jewish religion because of the Western society. What do I think? I'm not sure, but what do the Christians seem to say? That if you're good, you go to heaven. If you're bad, you go to hell and you're forever damned. You burn in the fires of hell. You're forever. I ask myself, and maybe someone could answer me, According to that version, what is good and what is bad? Nobody's 100% anything. So let's say there's a passing mark. What is the passing mark? Let's say it's 55% good, right? So if you're 57% good, you slid into home base, you just made it into heaven. Baruch Hashem. Now what did they do with the 43% bad that you did? They just throw it out. That doesn't seem to make sense. And what happens if you were 48% good? You missed it. What do they do? Dump you into hell? What do they do with the 48% good? They just ignore it? That doesn't seem to make sense either. You know what Judaism teaches? Judaism says the neshama is a chelik elika mimal mamash. We're part of God. We can add, when we do good, it adds to the neshama. That's a discussion itself. When we do bad, what happens? We cannot corrupt the neshama. You know what we can do to the neshama? You know, in South Africa, the summers are not long, the summer vacation. But here, it's from about June 20th to Labor Day. Mm-hmm. It's about 10 weeks. Yeah. What do you do with your kids for 10 weeks? So they send them off to summer camp, night camp, thank God. Get rid of them for 9 weeks. Baruch Hashem. Now imagine if you sent your son for 9 weeks to camp, he's 10 years old, and somehow he managed to evade his counselors and his CDC guys, and he didn't take a shower or bath in the entire 9 weeks. He comes home stinking, smelly, filthy. What do you do with him? You have to put him into a hot bath. Maybe you have to take steel wool and clean him and all that, right? But he hasn't damaged anything. What he's done is made himself dirty. The word in the Hebrew for hell, purgatory, is Gehenna. Jews are the ones who came up with the whole concept, but they corrupted it. The Jewish concept is that the Gan Eden, the paradise, is a reward for mitzvot that you did. And Gehenna is a cleansing process. Everybody goes through Gehenna. There's not a neshama that doesn't go through it. Even a tzaddik. But for a tzaddik, it's just like a mikvah, going from the physical to the spiritual. It's not painful. For a person, the average person, ein tzaddik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yechata, where we have many sins, those sins are like stains on the neshama. And Gehenna is a cleansing process. We are taught that the maximum a neshama can be in Gehenna is 12 months. Because, and one of the things that alleviates is the Kaddish that a child says. So because we don't want to say that our parents deserve the maximum, therefore Kaddish is 11 months. That's where it comes from. You see? Now, why? Where do you get that concept that Gehenna should be 12 months? And what does it mean, the fires of Gehenna? So you have there some books by Aryeh Kaplan. Aryeh Kaplan, I knew him, I met him a couple of times. Very spiritual person, he passed away very young. So he explains it like this. And let me tell you, paraphrase before he explains, just to give an analogy. I was once told an urban legend. I don't know if it's true or not, but this is the urban legend I was told. In Borough Park, does anybody remember in the 70s, the wedding movies? You didn't have phones or anything. You had a camera and you had to shoot the video, the reel. Then you sent it off for the developing. And then it came back and then you showed it on a big movie camera on the screen, right? So that's what happened in one wedding. And the Sunday that they were going to show the wedding film for the first time, You had the Bobbis and the Zaydis and the uncles and the aunts and the cousins, the whole extended family. 60 people came to watch the video. And do you know what they see in the video? The brother-in-law of the Khatan giving him a hug and pickpocketing his checks, his wedding checks. Can you believe that, Carl?
Yeah.
His wife didn't know that her husband's a ganef. The kids didn't know that their father's a ganef. Can you imagine what he felt like? He turned red, humiliated, if he has any consciousness. He would have liked the earth to swallow him up. And other than going to Waikiki, if he had to stay around ballpark, every time he saw one of his family members, he got all embarrassed. But even embarrassment has a limited amount of time. After a while, you stop being embarrassed. That is Aya Kaplan's definition of Gehenom. When you come up there, there's a video that had watched you your whole life. Here, we have all the explanations, all the excuses, all the rationalizations as to why we got up to what we did. But the truth is, it's Baba-Mises. It's all excuses. So can you imagine all your relatives are watching the video with you, and when they see what you got up to, it feels like hell on earth. You feel like you're burning up on fire, but that's a limited time. So I want to conclude with number one, the neshama exists, but the neshama has a limitation. What is the limitation of the neshama? What is the limitation of getting the reward in the next world? Do you know what the limitation is? We are made up of a body and a soul. Who are you rewarding? The soul. How about the body? Doesn't it deserve a reward? Sach says the scale says he's losing weight. He doesn't feel it yet, but he's giving up food. A lot of food that he'd like to eat, he's giving up. And that happens every time we do a mitzvah. We're making a sacrifice. So why does only the neshama get rewarded? You know what the Talmud says? There was once a owner of an orchard that had fruit, and he wanted it watched. I don't know why, but he hired a blind man and a lame man to watch the fruit. During the night, the blind man smelt it, the lame man saw it, they wanted it, but how are they going to get it? So they worked out that the blind one will put the lame one on his shoulders, and the lame one will direct him, and he'll get the fruit. And that's what they did. They ate it up. Next day, the guy says, "Who ate my fruit?" Blind guy says, "I can't see, don't look at me." Lame one says, "I can't walk, don't look at me." No, you don't have to be so much of a Sherlock Holmes. And they worked it out. And he put them both together and gave the psak. In the same way, says the Talmud, when you come upstairs, God says, "Oy, neshama, what did you get up to?" He says, "What do you want? I'm a free spirit floating around." Wasn't me, it was the body. Go to him. He goes to the body says, "I'm a shtick lump lying here." It wasn't me, it was the neshama. So what's God going to do? He's going to have to put them both back together and give them what they deserve. If that is true for bad, it's especially true for good. So Olam Haba now that we're talking about is the world of the neshamot. But remember, there's another Olam Haba. And that is when Mashiach comes. And there's going to be Tchiat HaMeitim. There's going to be, God will put the neshamas and the bodies back together, because that's the only place that Hashem can truly reward both parts. And we mustn't think that the body is just a piece of clothing. It's a lot more than that. And I want to finish with one little thought. Do you know what is the one thing in life that nobody can ever take away from you? Who can tell me? What is the one thing in life no one could ever take away from you, or you can never lose?
Mitzvah.
Okay. But what does that mean? You know what that means? That means the good you have done already is the only thing they cannot take away. Everything else you can lose. But the good that you have done, or the mitzvot you have done, that's yours forever. And that we should realize we're doing, as the Talmud says, Hakeren kayemet lo the principle, the interest we get in this world, the principle remains in the next world. Now, I'd like to open for any questions you'd like to ask me, but please don't ask on trigonometry. I was never good on that subject.
What does Gehenna mean? You explained-
Gehenna is
The actual
purgatory.
Yeah,
Gehenna is a certain valley.
valley,
It's in Jerusalem.
Gaze Valley, and Hinnom.
Hinnom is there's a certain place. Just like Gan Eden is a certain physical place and a spiritual place. Gehenna, there is a place outside the old city walls, which is called Gehenna.
And so cleansing refers to.
Purgatory means purging,
Yeah.
cleansing.
But there's another world, Sheol.
Christian purgatory comes from the Jewish Hinnom.
Yeah, I guess so. Any other questions?
Rabbi, I have a question. This is Charles.
Yes, Charles.
If-
how are you? I reckon-
If the soul and the body are separated at death,
Yeah.
why do they change the name of the person who's dying?
No, they don't. They could only change the name of a person if they try and change the name 30 days at least before he died. If they didn't change it 39 days before, the name does not apply. And the concept of changing the
Changing or
name,
adding?
well, adding, changing, the concept is that we are saying perhaps an evil decree was put out against this person. By adding or changing a name, we're like getting another muzzle. It's almost like another person, and hopefully that decree hasn't gone. But I must point out, there's two necessities for that name to stick and to become on his tombstone. One is that he had to recover from that illness. And the other is that he had to have it for at least 30 days. So if he had, God forbid, some people have cancer and they suffer even 6 months with that cancer. And if they added the name, let's say 5 months before, but he never recovered from that cancer, that name doesn't stick.
Thank you.
Anything else? Geesh, you see that? It was so clear that they understand every single thing there is to be asked. So maybe we could ask them a few questions. Thank you very much for your attendance and your.
Thank you.
By the way, as Mark could tell you, I made 10 chapters of Afterlife on a YouTube channel. So if you want, you can look that up.
Mazel tov, Rabbi, for your
One
grandson.
quick question. What would be good?
Yes.
Would that be a good follow-up to this lecture?
Sorry?
Would that be a good follow-up to
Yes.
this lecture?
If you're interested in what I said, definitely.
What's the link?
The link, Alex Carlebach on YouTube. Alex Carlebach channel. on YouTube.
You can also watch Abad of Zoom.
What? Yeah,
So you
Aitan has a question.
Yes,
mentioned that, the soul goes through a cleansing process. Every soul goes through a cleansing
Yes.
process. And it's only for a certain amount of time, but it's only for a year, 12 months.
just by the way, Kabbalistically, that is the final stage of going to the reward. Kabbalistically, there could be quite a few stages before you get to Gehenna, just by the way.
Beforehand.
Yeah.
Before you get to go to the actual cleansing state.
Correct.
So that's what I'm getting at.
Now, there's another question about.
Otherwise, it means it denotes that any person.
No,
regardless of
there are a lot of stages. The other thing that we didn't discuss is whether Jews believe in reincarnation. And that would be something similar to whether we believe in hell. It's not a question of whether we believe in the word. The question is, what is the Jewish definition of Gilgul HaNeshamot, of reincarnation, that we definitely do?
Oh, it's going on still.
Yeah, we believe in theory.
No. Gilgul HaNeshamot. Chiyas HaMeisim is after Mashiach comes.
Right. If you're ruling the Shemot, you need
Reincarnation now.
Right. And do we?
It's a long topic, and it's on the thing.
It's on the YouTube.
Let me ask you another question. Let me ask you another question that the Kabbalists asked. We believe in Chiyat HaMeisim, right? In the resurrection of the dead. Let us say the soul came down here 10 times in the history of the world. Now there's a resurrection of the dead. Which body is going to come back to life of the 10? So one answer is, we light a candle during Shiva, Yotzat. Why do we light a candle? Because a flame is the most spiritual physical thing we have in two ways. Everything else, if I let it go, it drops. A flame goes up. That's why a lot of people burn their fingers when they point down the match, because a flame is going to go up like the neshama. The other thing is, if I take this physical thing, this glass, I move it from here to here, where's the glass now? It is only here, not here. I take 5 candles, and I take one flame. I put it on the 5 candles. Where's the flame now? On all 5. It's not 20% on each. It's 100% on each. You see, we mustn't put physical limitations and concepts onto spiritual ones, as we're discussing before about color. Says the Gemara and the Kabbalists that a spark of that neshama, every lifetime in which you contributed to the fulfillment of that neshama, is enough to give that body life. So the answer is all 10 can come back like a flame. And that leads to another thing. Reincarnation is a very long discussion, but the question also can be asked, how do you know when you come up to heaven that you'll meet your loved one? Maybe they're reincarnated in Cincinnati or something. And the answer again is that we talk about 5 parts to the neshama: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. By the way, chaya, yechida remains in heaven. Nefesh, ruach, neshama comes down. Okay, those 5 are made up of countless of parts, and parts is a physical thing, not a spiritual. But let's say there's 5. Okay, now let's say these 2 I have completed in my lifetime. So these 3 still need work. They'll have to come back down. But is it fair to make these 2 come back again? No, they finished. So they will find 2 kind of connected of those 2, and they'll add it to this. and send that back. So we should understand as follows. Yes, it's true, our general neshama will come back. But the truth is, every time we come down into this world, our exact makeup, our spiritual DNA, if you want to call it, is unique. It has never been and never will be. That pintalayid. So you can have both concepts at the same time. You can have Gilgul and Neshamot, that the general soul is reincarnated, but there's a uniqueness to your lifetime that's never been and never will be. And that will be there.
So that then you won't have your loved one in Cincinnati, you'll find your loved one up.
Whatever that means, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, read this question.
You read it, I can't read it. So
Read it, you know?
read it.
It's maybe can your beloved pets meet you in heaven? I know they are not considered to have a soul.
From a Torah point of view, the neshama we are talking about is the human being. They have there's a different concept for other creations. You know, if you talk about that, I once went, I don't know if I told you this, I once went on a walking tour in the Kruger Park. And the guy who took us around didn't only take us to animals, he showed us the ways of the, if you want to call it the jungle. Do you know that the animals make roads in the jungles? They all follow the same roads. And then he showed us a long grass. There's one animal that comes and eats the first third, second third, for third. And then he says like this, do you know that the ecology of the world is perfect? The way the Creator made the world, everything is perfect. The only ones who can destroy and imperfect the world are the human beings. If you would take away human beings out of the world, it would run like clockwork. There would be no problems in life. That's what he said. Now comes the question, then why? Why did God do that? Do you know what is the uniqueness of the human being that no other creation has, not pets, not anything else?
Besides the opposable thumb?
It's not intelligence, it's not communication, it's not, you know what it is? Only the human being can go against its instinct. An angel can't go against its instinct. An animal can't, not even the sun and the stars can go. Only a human being can go against its instinct. A cat can't look himself in the mirror and say, oh, I let myself go. That's it. No tuna fish for me for the next week. I can't see that.
Well, then, no.
Only-
But cats, yeah, they could, but they won't.
No, they can't. Only a human being. Why? Human beings were given a mission in life, and that is to perfect the world. By that I mean, you know, the Greeks worshiped the human body. They thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world. They invented the Olympics. And one of the reasons that we have ribbons for the awards and not pins is because they used to do the original Olympics without clothes. Women weren't allowed that, by the way. Only men. Would have been quite bloody to put a pin on. You see? That's a joke. Anyway, so they worshiped the human body. And they were abhorred by Judaism giving the body a bris. They said, how can you desecrate the most beautiful thing in the world? And God wanted you to have a bris. He would have created you. Who are you to interfere with God's creation? So the sages said to the Greeks, tell me, what is better? That which God makes or that which man makes? So they said, obviously what God makes. He said, oh, really? He brought some wheat kernels and he brought some bread.
Eat the wheat.
And he said, what do you prefer to eat? He showed them a cave and showed them a house. And he said, where do you prefer to live? God created an imperfect world. And he wants human beings to perfect the world. But if you want to give the human being the ability to impact the world positively, you have to give him the ability to impact the world negatively too. Otherwise, he has no impact. So that's why animals cannot impact the world for good or for bad. They just carry on. The whole world is perfect because it just carries on. Only the human being who is given the job of completing God's work, Nasa Adam B'Tzalmeinu, to complete it and bring it to its ultimate goal. That's why we were given the opportunity to destroy it too. And that's where the reward and the punishment and the freedom of choice comes in. So I hope that answers that question.
How have we been faring so far?
You know what? All I could say is that thank God he has a different view to how we're doing than we do. And you know what the proof is? That we're still going. If he felt that we weren't, he would have just stopped it. The fact that he keeps it going means he still believes in us. And if he still believes in us, we got to believe in ourselves too.
Shavua Tov, everybody.
Charles, thank you. I'm sorry I missed you this visit.
Yeah. Have a safe trip home.
And you know what else you're missing, Charles? Show them the refreshments then.
Show me what?
The refreshments,
That you're missing here.
Oh, well, what can I do?
the ones that in person.
my best.
you can get.
Give my best to Mendel Lipska. Tell him I tried to email him twice to wish him mazel tov.
Respond.
Oh boy, I'll tell
Never
you.
responded.
It's not like him.
No, well. Okay. Thank
God
you.
bless.
Thank you, Moshe. Moshe, you had a birthday recently.
Ooh,
Not me.
No?
did in the past year.
I mean,
April?
last year, yeah.
Past year.
No. When is your birthday? You know?
Coming up in July.
Oh, July. I don't know. I thought it was April.
You still have time to get him the present.
No, Shavuot is
The
coming.
day after Tisha B'Av, Yud Menachem Av, he was born.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you, everyone. Again, it's on YouTube. If anyone missed it, it's on YouTube, the recording, and also the channel of my father's series of the Afterlife is, if you look up his name, Alex Carlebach channel, he has a whole series there, 10 videos on the Afterlife. You could subscribe to the channel. All right, have a wonderful night.
And it's called and that's called The Game. Just one last quick.
It's called what?
The Game.
The Game.
No, the 10-part series.
It's called The Game.
No, what is it called again?
What's it called?
What is the series called?
What's the series called?
No, it's in its channel.
It's called, look it up. Life after
Life After Death.
Thank you.
This recording will be on my YouTube, on Moshe Carlebach's YouTube.
Who's 461?
I don't know how to, you have to ask Mark how you can make it into the channel. And then also, we'll be having a Shavuot next Sunday, a dairy brunch. And then also, let's not only focus on the afterlife, let's focus on this life. All right. Have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you so much. Thank you very much.